You are listening to the ERP, Organizational Change Journal, a podcast brought to you by Nestell Associates.
The structural frame is maybe the oldest way of thinking about organizations. It's the rational frame. Traditionally, organizations were depicted in organizational charts, would show a link, a series of boxes that are linked to one another in a hierarchical way. And so the structure is about how we both divide up work. Any group of any size is going to start to divide up work one way or another. But as soon as we start to divide up work, we create the problem of how do we coordinate the different pieces. And so then there's a question of a division of labor on the one hand and integration, coordination on the other. And that's the essence of structure, is figuring those two pieces out for any given situation. The human resource frame is, I think, the second oldest way of thinking about organizations. And probably there have been versions of it that are around for centuries, but it really began to emerge early, middle 20th century. And, historically, often people who ran or owned organizations figured you hire someone, you pay them to do a job, they should do a job, that's all we need to know. It's as simple as that. And eventually, particularly in the 20th century, you started seeing people saying, well, it's more complicated than that because people are more complicated than that. And there's always the question of what's the relationship or the alignment between what the organization needs and what the people need, what the organization wants to do and what the people want to do. If you get that alignment right, you're likely to get much better production, much higher motivation, much higher morale and excitement from the people who are working in your organization. When the alignment is wrong, the worse the alignment, the less enthusiastic people are likely to be, the less motivated they're likely to be, the less allied with management purposes they're likely to be. So that's the central issue in the human resource frame. How do we understand people and how do we align whatever we're trying to do with the people? It was much more recently that people began to apply political ideas. There's been a political science discipline for a long time, but they were not applied so much to organizations. But around the 1960s, 70s or so on, you began to see people saying, organizations are political. Well, people who worked in them knew that. But around the world, most people, most of the time, really dislike politics and they really dislike politicians. And so historically, often in organizations, there's been this sense politics are bad. They shouldn't be here. Let's try to get rid of them. Doesn't work. You can't get rid of them. And you can't get rid of them because you will have politics whenever you have certain basic conditions present in a situation. And those basic conditions are really very simple. One is scarce resources. Money, whatever resources people would like to have, and there's not enough to go around. You can't satisfy everybody. So scarce resources is the first condition, and the second is individuals or groups who have different ideas about how those resources ought to be distributed. You want more than I think you deserve. I want more than you think I deserve. As soon as you have that, whether the scarce resource is money or a policy decision or some value, whatever it is, as soon as you have that, inevitably you have conflict. Moreover, it's not a conflict in many cases that you could resolve through analysis. The example I always think of is bringing together a group of Catholic priests and Baptist ministers and asking them to come to agreement around papal authority. And you ask, well, is there data or analysis that could help people reach a decision? It's pretty hard to come up with data or analysis that would help people reach a decision because there are fundamental differences between the groups. And whenever you have that circumstance, that kind of difference that is really not a rational problem that you can have a substantive solution to, then power becomes the key resource. Whoever has more power is likely to have more influence over the decision and is likely to be happier with the results that they get. That's the essence of the political frame. The symbolic frame basically says the world is not intrinsically meaningful. The world only has meaning as humans give it meaning. And much of what's really important to us is uncertain, it's ambiguous, and we struggle to figure out how do we make sense out of these things? So that's what the symbolic frame is about. It's about how do we give meaning? How do we interpret the world in which we're in? How do we understand our work? How do we understand our organization? That's all the essence of the symbolic frame.